Dear Libertarians, I want to have a brief conversation about why I personally believe your ideology, at least at this time, is nowhere near the best possible thing for America. I personally used to be a libertarian. My father was a libertarian, my mother libertarian, my family and many intelligent, well-intentioned, well-adjusted adults that I know are libertarian, even still. So please, in no way think that I am going to assault any libertarians for their beliefs, attempting to draw corollaries between what they believe and who they are, and in some way paint your belief as something bad about you. In fact, I think it's something, generally speaking, good in modern America to have a belief that deviates from the norm. And libertarianism definitely does do that. Now, clearly, there is something to be said for the argument that many people are, at least during this election cycle, picking up libertarianism as a sort of fad, a quasi-fad, in order to escape the socially weighted conundrum of choosing between what they perceive as two terrible choices for our country, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, right? And that's understandable. To say, well, hang on, there's a third choice. His name's Gary Johnson, and look at me. I'm not picking any of the two bad choices. Aren't I better than everyone else, right? That happens. It really does. People try to signal their virtue to other people. It's not a conspiracy. It happens all the time, right? And so if you're a libertarian because you want to, look to be a virtuous person to your friends or family, I really can't blame you yet again, but I definitely won't hold you in high regard for taking a position, as the least of three evils, God forbid. And I know you're thinking, well, assumedly, based on this title, I personally must be taking a position on the least of two evils, right? If I discount Gary Johnson. Well, I'd like to ask you to hear me out. Here's why I think classical liberalism, aka modern libertarianism, is not the answer to what ails our society today. The free market is a wonderful, wonderful idea if it can function correctly. And it appears as though, at least for the most part, the ideology behind, say, anarcho-capitalism could be very effective, right? Certainly you have some situations in which a more liberal, control the corporations before they control you type of mindset does need to be brought into play. But then from the other direction, many times the government controls the corporations far too much and completely destroys their power. And I think more often than not, that is the issue of the day, right? Is over-regulation of our market, at least in terms of the output of the market itself and the overall health of the economy, right? Everything is multifaceted, and there are all sorts of questions to answer at every level of analysis, both for the individual and society at large. But when you look at anarcho-capitalism, and you look at the idea of the free market and the way in which it allows voluntary cooperation between different producers and consumers to create the most efficient possible economic solution by allowing the distributed network to make decisions as opposed to attempting to make decisions at the level of one centralized governmental, almost always, source. It makes perfect sense. Going back to what I said just a minute ago, yes, during the Industrial Revolution or whatever, in a situation in which there is no competition at all. Clearly, competition must be created through some means. That competition, that's the whole crux of the matter, right? The bringing down of like the price of a good or service to its most efficient level, bringing up production efficiency to its highest level. This is all based on the quasi-evolutionary forces of competition, right? And if you don't have that, if you don't have a competitor that's willing to sell to you for less, that's willing to sell to your consumer base for less than you might be willing to, then you can just price gouge. And we see this. We see this today in America. Definitely all the time, but two instances that come to mind immediately would be the Martin Scacchelli. I can never say that man's last name, but Martin Scamelli, the gentleman who purchased a very important drug that what it's for is escaping me at this time. I feel like I should know this, but he purchased a drug that many people rely on for their well-being, and the story that made the news was that he raised the price from like $13 to like $700, and everybody was freaking out. And apparently, if you dig deeper into the story and what actually happened, it's not like that at all. In fact, the gentleman was providing the drug free of charge to those who couldn't afford it. And he was basically subsidizing those people with the influx of cash from the insurance companies and or the people that could afford it. And so, kudos to him, unless I'm not understanding exactly what was going on, right? Clearly, price gouging of a critically important drug that some people rely on for their very livelihoods is not cool, right? But with many liberals, the argument stops right there. The argument stops at it's not cool, and immediately the idea that corporations are evil and that capitalism is evil is just thrown directly to the forefront. It seems to just be the automatic solution for everyone nowadays. Now, I don't want to get into why that is just yet, but let's finish talking about what actually was wrong with the situation described, the aforementioned issue of the price gouging on this drug, because it wasn't capitalism, actually. It was a confluence of events. If you look at everything that was there, right? If you had a socialized system that said, hey, you can't sell a drug, you can't sell this drug for anything more than $15. All right, well, that would take care of the problem now, wouldn't it? Except, it doesn't necessarily take care of the problem, because if you look at a wider net of effects, you can see that, well, maybe the companies that would have otherwise sold the drug just don't do it anymore because it's not cost efficient for them or something, right? And the drug literally just goes away, and then nobody has it at all. But anyway, theoretically, that's a solution, and that's what a lot of people latch onto. But so in a capitalist system, you can raise the price as high as you want, right? And that's what people see. They see that you can raise the price high, and therefore capitalism is evil. I'm here to tell you it's not. It's not even close. If competition is allowed, then yes, in capitalism, you can raise the price as high as you want. But if you raise it higher, if you raise it from $13 to $700 and someone else is willing to sell the drug for $14, you will not get any business. Everyone will go to your competitor. Plain and simple. And there are situations in which, logistically, that just doesn't happen. And maybe we need to have some reasonable and incredibly rare limitations for when there is no possible, practical, pragmatic solution to the problem at hand. But generally speaking, encouraging competition is all we need to do. And you will hear people claim that that's not true at all. Look into it. I mean, think about it. Run a couple models. God, I don't know, play a game with your friends. Figure out how this stuff works, because it's pretty straightforward. There's a lot of complexity at work, but complexity doesn't mean, complexity only means very simple rules moving, with many, many, many moving parts. It can be worked out. So what was wrong with the price gouging on this drug was the lack of competition. The lack of competition didn't exist because capitalism is evil. The lack of competition existed because the FDA wouldn't allow anyone else to sell this drug. It wasn't patented, if I'm not mistaken, but basically there was a limit. Only this one company had the rights to produce and sell this drug. The actual problem is the government that's supposed to be protecting the people, right? The government that is put in place by the people who expect it to keep things like this from happening actually caused it. It's fascinating, isn't it? So now that I think we've gotten to the end of that wonderful tirade, and maybe in your mind, if you come into this video, as a staunch socialist, I don't expect you to walk away as anything else. But I hope I've planted the seed of doubt about the evil of capitalism in your head. I hope I make you think, and that's what our little intro here was about. What I'd really like to talk about today, though, is why libertarianism isn't the correct solution for us right now. It's not. It was at one time in the past, but it's not anymore. The issue with libertarianism and freedom at large and the free market and all these wonderful things, these systems that, when properly set in place, do work, is people. People, human nature. Human nature destroys these wonderful systems that we could otherwise have, that could otherwise bring prosperity to everyone. We destroy them through our own mostly foolishness, although selfishness also plays a very large part. Now, there's many moving parts here. Today I want to focus on one in particular, all right? And don't think that my focus on this one moving part in the equation in any way, denies the reality of others. But let's talk about the losers. Yeah, you heard me right. The losers. The people who fail in the free market. I mean, of course, there's going to be some people that fail, right? Sure. You have many, many people in a functional, prosperous, capitalist society. You have many people that succeed. I mean, even our poor in America aren't that poor, right? And America is by no means the perfect capitalist society. We are not bad. And I think we're getting worse. Although, who knows? Who knows what the future will hold for us? But lots of conjecture to be had. So let's talk about the losers. Let's say libertarians are right. And let's say right now, we go out and we completely rewrite the playbook. We elect, the revolutionary future version of Ron Paul. And let's be honest, Gary Johnson is not that. But we get a new Ron Paul in office, right? And he has the power and the backing, and we completely change our government. We completely change the game. We set up a super efficient system, a wonderful free market. We encourage, free trade, competition everywhere. If libertarianism is right, if the free market, anarcho-capitalist principles are right, then, and I believe they are, for the most part, we should see prosperity abound, right? It's maybe not perfect, but America should start really chugging forward again like it has in the past. However, even still, some people within that system will lose. They will fail. They will try to find a job. They will try to find good work. They will try to start a company, and they will fail. It's part of the whole competition thing. You will have some people that lose in order for the others to win. In order to create that maximum, efficiency state that anarcho-capitalism searches for, you will have some people that fail. And what happens when they fail is a very important question to ask yourself when attempting to unravel libertarian philosophy. Because the issue is not with the philosophy itself. The issue is with the people within the philosophy, the greater system at large, not the free market. When these people fail in an incredibly prosperous society, even without a social welfare, safety net, a government mandated one, with proper culture, and culture can go all over the place. Culture can go in any direction, but say we're talking about maybe a quasi-conservative culture, small town culture. Everybody knows everybody, everybody takes care of everybody. And even without that, there's many other possible solutions. But with a reasonable culture, the people that lose can be taken care of, even without the government. Charities, voluntary charities, can take care of these people, right? Especially the undeserving poor, the people that cannot win in the free market through no fault of their own, perhaps, because of disability or some other misfortune in their life. And all's well and good, right? Until you bump into the people that are considered the undeserving poor, the ones that do not deserve to not be poor, the ones that have basically chosen to be poor, the people that for whatever reason think that they are worth more on the job market than they actually are and are not willing to realistically play with the numbers, the people that take a potential, like even a light drug habit like marijuana and turn it into a lifestyle that destroys their worth to society. There are many situations, and I don't want to just pick into them all, but just the general moniker is considered lazy, and of course it's far more complex than that, right? Everything's more complex, but the lazy, we'll go with that to keep it simple, right? The lazy, the people that should be able to do better but don't for whatever reason. And they fail. They fail in the job market. And if they fail, they still need to eat. They're still human. They still have a drive to survive, right? You would hope that maybe they would be picked up by the charity of others, but especially as this class grows larger, usually due to a poison in the culture, the voluntary charity kind of goes away. People don't want to help them anymore. People don't want to continue to enable them. And if they do, what happens next? The enablement of certain sections of the lower class of society leads to the enablement of more, because the enablement of the first group incentivizes others to join them, to survive while being lazy on the charity of others. So eventually the voluntary social safety net breaks down, almost for certain, right? Unless the society is incredibly prosperous, but even then, the incentivization of the group that borders near the quote-unquote lazy barrier, right? When they see their friends getting to just kind of slide through life, they may want to join. Human beings are fascinating creatures, and one of our survival traits, if you will, that we've picked up via evolutionary processes is to be lazy. And we think of it as a bad thing, but it's not actually. It's a search for maximum efficiency. The human body, the human brain, the human wants to search for a way to accomplish whatever it needs to accomplish without expending much energy, expending as little energy as possible. And this is great in like famine situations. It is. When you're living on the plains and you're trying to hunt for food, you are lazy because there's not that much food. And you're trying to just take it easy, not burn all your calories, and hopefully survive. But in this situation, in a prosperous society where we need everyone to work, right? Or maybe not everyone, but you know what I mean. It doesn't always work out so well. So what happens when these people get dumped out of the voluntary social safety net? I mean, many things can happen, but we're going to keep it simple, right? Generally speaking, violence. Violence is what happens. They want to survive, and if they can't find a way to do it, they will use violence. We've seen this in the past. Before, America, and not just America, but using America as an example, became a heavily taxed, government-mandated social welfare state. We had a, generally speaking, free market, and we had people who, for whatever reason, justify it or don't, whether you choose to justify these actions or think these actions were reprehensible, the reality is that these actions are always justified for the people performing them, and it serves as an indicator of human behavior. So we had in the past, right, the free market, and people who thought that maybe their working conditions weren't good enough or whatever, for whatever reason, and you have them forming unions and literally creating violence. There's stories, feel free to look them up, of riots, and I think even almost like small scale, very small scale military engagements over something like how much money they're getting paid per day. And maybe they weren't getting paid enough, but that's not the point. The point is that when people feel cheated, this is what happens. So the reality of whether or not they're cheated is entirely irrelevant. There will always be people who feel like they are cheated, and for whatever reason will resort to this pathway. We have changed. They no longer use violence themselves. They instead protest. They attempt to use the state to inflict the violence for them. It's an even more efficient course of action. It's incredibly lazy. They don't even have to use violence. They don't have to work. They don't have to use violence. They don't work, and they have someone else be violent for them. So what happens is these people do that via unions, protesting for a higher minimum wage, protesting for different working conditions, protesting for, I don't know, expansion of welfare for everyone. Think the universal basic income. God. Don't get me started on that. So, they protest or whatever, or inflict violence, whatever. They go outside of the free market and attempt to use coercion to damage the free market in order to get what they want, what they believe they deserve, or what they believe others deserve. And the compassion of those, even I'm talking about the class of people that lose in the free market, but it's not just them. It's also the very compassionate, middle, lower to upper middle class, and the lower class too. The compassionate people who maybe don't understand exactly how the free market works, right? I'm sure you libertarians understand how the free market works, but not everybody does. This is not everybody's day job or night job. If your night job is maybe arguing with people on Facebook about free market principles, and I know I'm talking to some of you out there right now, but not everybody understands how this stuff works, right? And when they hear something like, "Well, you're not making enough money, we need a higher minimum wage," it makes a lot of sense to them. And not just to the people who want that higher minimum wage, but also to the people that just kind of are coasting by and hear someone screaming, "Help me, I'm not making enough money," and the compassion inside of them flares up and they think, well, let's fix that. And so they help out, right? They this lower loser class that's completely defunct, that is completely dropped out of society, out of economic society, if you will, they elicit compassion and assistance from higher echelons. And subsequently, they get what they want. Let's just jump right to the end, right? They do get what they want. Through force of their own or through the state, they raise the minimum wage. They increase welfare. They, add more and more and more restrictions on working conditions. Now you got to be careful in New York State. You better not misgender someone. You can get sued, right? Good Lord. These expansions of so-called workers' rights lead to an inevitable conclusion. They damage the free market. Not only do they damage the people they claim to help, like the minimum wage, right? By raising the minimum wage, you think you're somehow getting more money. No, you're pricing low-skilled workers out of the job market. The very people the minimum wage hike is supposed to assist. These low-skilled workers that aren't worth more. You're somehow thinking you're gonna force business owners into paying them more. Business owners just won't hire them. And God forbid you try to use the state to force business owners to hire them. That would be jumping right to the end of my argument, where the free market completely breaks down. You cannot, anyway, let's get there. Let's work our way there. So the things that they do damage the free market, right? Raising the minimum wage, obviously takes more money out of the pocket of the business owner and causes him to have to raise prices and change his strategy in other ways in order to attempt to stay afloat. Because remember, in the competitive free market, you're not making tons and tons of money unless you are one of the humongous companies that nobody can compete with. In the very competitive areas of the free market, you are making enough money, hopefully enough to get by, right? Because your competitors are keeping your prices low by also keeping their prices low, and their prices are kept low by your prices being low. If I may go off on a really quick tangent, you hear about price fixing and price gouging and all sorts of wonderful stuff, but socialists completely fail to notice that you never have to go to the government and demand that they force the gas stations in your town to lower the price per gallon of gas when the price per barrel goes down. When the price of a barrel of crude oil goes down, the whole market instantly adjusts. God, who knows? Maybe it is mandated in your area, but it's definitely not in mine. And I don't think I've ever heard of it being mandated, and yet the market adjusts. It adjusts because of competition. Because if gas station X does not lower the price per gallon, gas station Y will, and everyone will just go to gas station Y. That's the free market at work right there, folks. But I digress. You're probably not scraping by as a small business owner, small medium business owner. I'm sorry, you probably are, maybe not scraping by, but you're not, you're not just wallowing in money like the monopoly man. Most likely. There are always exceptions, right? But when you raise the price of the minimum wage, the price of work, you damage the free market. You cause that business to have to adjust. When you increase workers' rights, and there are some workers' rights that I'm totally on board with, that I think are reasonable within their context. But when you start adding all sorts of arbitrary BS workers' rights, you increase the cost of and the danger for anyone to own a small business by increasing litigation fees, litigation and therefore litigation insurance, right? You price people out of the market. When you increase the welfare state, you yet again damage the free market, both directly and indirectly, by first taking money out of people's paychecks, causing them to need more money from the business in order to survive, as well as taking money directly from the business in corporate taxation. You once again have damaged the free market and caused it to have to adjust. And when the free market has to adjust, it usually does not adjust perfectly. And what happens when it doesn't adjust perfectly? You create more losers. For example, the minimum wage is a direct first order example of this. The minimum wage is raised. Low-skilled workers who thought they was going to get more money are now priced out of a job and won't be hired at all. And they are going straight on welfare or, God forbid, turning to crime, right? They are screwed at that point. And you know what happens to those people? They join the loser class. I keep calling it the loser class because I want you to understand that it has a very real, tangible ramification within the free market system. But we would generally refer to these people as socialists. Although definitely there are people who hold socialist ideals who are not in the loser class. But this is the core of all socialism, is to take care of these people, right? As you increase the loser class and you attempt to adjust the free market to benefit or accommodate them, you just create more losers. And it snowballs. It has a snowballing effect. It grows and grows and grows and grows until the left-wing cancer has metastasized. Metastasized. I hope I said that right for any doctors that stumble upon this video. When it does, you're done, and you have basically you have one or two routes for your country. When the loser class has grown so large that it's created such a large social safety net, aka tremendous welfare state and huge drain on the free market, you go one of two ways. Either you go full Marxist, Leninist, communist, socialist, whatever, any derivative of that, and you end up with a collapsing economy before too long, or you go in some sort of authoritarian / fascist direction, right? And it doesn't always have to be fascism per se. We can look at China, actually, as an interesting example of the eventual conclusion of this type of ideology, in which they went this way and they created an authoritarian government. And the authoritarian government was not fascist by any stretch. Nobody's calling China fascist. But what they did actually is the authoritarian government was like, hey, wait a second. We've got all the power. And you know what? We're smart enough to realize that we're really screwing this up. And so they started going more and more free market, right? They really did. In fact, I've heard it said that China today is somewhat more free market than America today, right? At least in some ways. And because of that, and other things that are unique to the Chinese situation, they're prospering. And that's a whole nother story. But anyway, so I mean, this is the eventual solution, and here we're only talking about one aspect, right? One singular aspect of what happens when you take libertarianism and implement it. When you take libertarian freedom ideals and implement them without any sort of checks and balances on them. And this is just one single little aspect. God, I could talk for hours, about the open borders libertarians. Are you freaking kidding me? You realize that when you have a democratic nation, if you just allow anyone into it, they will just simply vote to remove your freedoms. I mean, you could invade a libertarian country by just migrating people in and then having all those people vote to, join Empire X. I mean, it's just ridiculous, right? But the principles of libertarianism, the principles of classical liberalism are wonderful in their own right at any point that the idealism within them can be contained by practical constraints in line with reality. And one of those realities that libertarians seem very apt to attempt to avoid is the reality of human nature. So, with the argument complete, I think for the most part, I don't want to go back and recap it. I've been speaking for 34 minutes. And if any of you have made it to the end of this video, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening to me. I think maybe I'll come back and just kind of yell at my computer, once in a while, maybe a little more often. We'll see if maybe I can produce some good content that someone somewhere can find value in. Feel free to ask any questions in the comment section below. As long as this doesn't blow up or anything, I will attempt to answer and communicate with you all. Until next time.